I spent 43 years sacrificing for my daughter Olivia. I worked 12-hour nursing shifts with swollen ankles to put her through private school. I delayed retirement for 7 years to help with her $86,000 law school debt. I even sold my grandmother's jewelry to cover the down payment on her first home. But the day I woke up from emergency gallbladder surgery, still groggy from anesthesia, she was already at my bedside with power of attorney papers. "It's for your own protection, Mom," she said, voice honey-sweet, while her husband Daniel nodded approvingly behind her. Ice spread through my body, starting at my fingertips and creeping inward like frost on glass. 3 days later, I stood at the ATM outside my credit union, staring in disbelief. Available balance, $212.47. I pressed the button again, trembling fingers against cold plastic. Last week, my balance was $42,370, my entire life savings from decades of night shifts and overtime. Blood drained from my face as I gripped the ATM for support. An elderly man in line asked if I needed help, but I couldn't find my voice, that steady, authoritative voice that had guided countless nervous parents through their children's medical crises. At home, I called Olivia immediately. "There must be a mistake with my account," I said, fighting for calm, automatically reaching for my wrist to check my pulse, a career habit. "No mistake, Mom," she replied with that same honey-sweet tone that now sent warning signals through my nervous system. "We've moved your funds to a protected account. Remember the paperwork at the hospital? It's being managed properly now." Managed by whom? My pulse raced beneath my fingertips. 110. By us, of course. Daniel has excellent financial sense. The money is just being held in trust for your care expenses. Olivia, that's every penny I have. I didn't authorize. "Mom," she interrupted, her voice taking on that special patient tone reserved for difficult children or confused seniors. "You did authorize it. That's what the power of attorney was for. Your memory lapses are exactly why these arrangements are necessary." Memory lapses? I'd forgotten a lunch date once, after working a double shift at the pediatric ward. I'd misplaced my glasses twice last month, ordinary moments of fatigue that Olivia had apparently been cataloging as evidence. "I need that money returned to my account immediately," I said, my nurse's training finally kicking in, the calm, firm voice that brooked no argument. "We'll discuss it at Sunday dinner," she replied dismissively. "I have a client waiting." As she hung up, anger sent warmth flooding back into my ice-cold extremities. But before I could process this revelation, my doorbell rang. Outside stood a cheerful woman with a camera and clipboard. "Mrs. Harmon? I'm Lisa from Cornerstone Realty. Your daughter said you'd be expecting me to take preliminary photos for the listing." "Listing?" The word felt foreign in my mouth. "For the house sale," she explained, bright smile faltering at my expression. "Given your medical situation, your daughter mentioned you'd be transitioning to assisted living at Oak Ridge Manor. They require proof of assets, so we're fast-tracking the sale." Time stopped as I stood in my doorway, blocking entry to my home, where I'd raised Olivia, where I'd converted the sunroom into my quilting workshop, where I'd built a second career that my daughter dismissed as nothing more than a grandmotherly hobby. My hand found my pulse point. 120 now. Definitely tachycardic. The woman continued talking about downsizing opportunities and senior-friendly communities, but I heard only the thunder of blood in my ears. "Your daughter explained everything," Lisa added reassuringly when I remained silent. "The senior living facility needs proof of assets before they'll hold your spot." I stood perfectly still, counting my heartbeats as I'd taught nervous children before procedures. 1, 2, she'd taken my money. She was taking my home. She was dismantling my life piece by piece without my knowledge or consent, all under the guise of protection. And she had no idea, not the slightest inkling, about what my grandmotherly hobby was really worth. "I'm sorry," I finally said, my voice finding its professional cadence, the tone that had commanded respect in emergency rooms. But there's been a serious misunderstanding. This house is not for sale. I closed the door firmly, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against it as my legs threatened to give way. In the silent house, I heard my heartbeat beginning to slow, my breathing returning to normal. The initial shock was passing, and in its place crystallized a single clear thought. This was war, and Olivia had no idea what she was up against. I met Robert Harmon when I was 21, fresh out of nursing school. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos, monitors beeping, staff calling orders, antiseptic scent clinging to everything. Robert came in with a young boy who'd fallen from a tree, the child's arm clearly broken. While the doctors set the fracture, I noticed how gently Robert calmed the frightened child with stories and quiet jokes. "You're good with him," I said, preparing cast materials. "Practice," he replied with a tired smile. "I teach elementary school, 5th grade." We married 6 months later, a teacher and a nurse, both caregivers, both on public service salaries, both certain we could change the world through small daily kindnesses. When Olivia was born 2 years later, I counted her tiny fingers and toes with the same precision I counted medication doses. "She's perfect," Robert whispered. 7 years later, Robert died. A sudden aneurysm. There 1 minute coaching Olivia's soccer team. Gone the next. I performed CPR while waiting for the ambulance, my training kicking in even as my world collapsed. My fingers knew exactly where to place compressions, my mind automatically counting rhythm, even as I screamed inside. That night, after the hospital paperwork and initial shock, I sat at our kitchen table with our life insurance policy and a notepad. Robert had only basic coverage through the school district, $50,000. Our mortgage was $1,404. Olivia would need braces soon. College loomed ahead. I made a decision that night that shaped the next 3 decades. Olivia would have everything I could possibly give her. She would not feel her father's loss through missed opportunities. I would work enough for 2 parents. I took night shifts to attend her daytime school events. I worked holidays for premium pay. I stayed in pediatrics, despite offers to move into administration, because the scheduling flexibility allowed me to be room mother, soccer team nurse, and field trip chaperone. Every time Olivia succeeded, it validated my choices: her private school awards, her acceptance to pre-law, her swift rise at the corporate firm. Each achievement felt partly mine because I had sacrificed to make them possible. What I couldn't see then was that with each sacrifice, I was teaching Olivia that my purpose was supporting her ascent. I was showing her that my needs came second, always. I remember the day I started quilting. Olivia was 15, increasingly independent and embarrassed by my presence. I'd taken a rare weekend off, expecting mother-daughter time, only to learn she'd made plans with friends. Alone and restless, I found myself in the craft store, buying fabric on impulse. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, cutting squares and piecing them together, the precise movements soothing my nurse's hands, accustomed to constant activity. When Olivia came home and saw me working, she laughed. "Mom, you're not exactly the grandmotherly type," she said, kissing the top of my head. Something about the repetitive, careful piecing of fragments into a cohesive whole spoke to me. I started small baby quilts for coworkers, simple patterns during hospital breaks. Then I discovered historical textile preservation and everything changed. My nursing background gave me a unique perspective on archival techniques. I developed a method for incorporating photographs and documents into quilts without degrading the originals, creating living family histories that could be touched and passed down. My first commission came from a doctor at the hospital, $2,000 for a memory quilt incorporating his mother's handwritten recipes. Then a local family wanted their Civil War-era ancestors' letters preserved. $3,100. Word spread among collectors and museums. Soon I had a 6-month waiting list. Meanwhile, Olivia graduated law school with $86,000 in debt. "I'll help you pay it off," I promised, delaying retirement. She looked relieved but not surprised. Of course I would help. I always had. When her first law practice failed 3 years later, I emptied my emergency fund to cover her $42,000 in business debts. When she and Daniel decided her stepdaughter needed private preschool at $27,000 per year, I contributed without hesitation. Through it all, Olivia viewed my quilting as a cute hobby, something to keep me busy in retirement. "It's good you have something to occupy your time, Mom," she'd say, patting my hand. She never asked about my techniques, never questioned where the money came from for my increasingly generous gifts. In her mind, I was still living on my nurse's pension. It was easier that way for her. I remember the first time I noticed Olivia watching me carefully, cataloging my movements with a concern that felt predatory. I was 63, working on a complex commission for a museum. I'd been up late finalizing the design and forgotten our lunch date. When she arrived unannounced, I was flustered and apologetic. "Mom, that's the 3rd time you've forgotten something this month," she said, her attorney's eyes assessing me. "I was working, Olivia. I lost track of time."
"Working," she repeated with that special emphasis, "on your quilts."
The dismissive, patronizing tone made something twist inside me, but I'd spent so many years accommodating her. I simply nodded and apologized again. After that, every small mistake became evidence. A misplaced phone, a forgotten grocery item, normal moments of fatigue that Olivia interpreted or chose to interpret as cognitive decline. I didn't realize she was building a case until it was too late. The emergency gallbladder surgery caught me off guard. I'd ignored the symptoms, too busy with commissions. By the time I admitted something was wrong, it was nearly septic. The doctor later told me I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky waking up in recovery to find Olivia and Daniel already there, papers in hand, concern etched into their faces so perfectly it might have been rehearsed. "Just a precaution," Daniel had said as I signed the power of attorney. 3 days later, standing at the ATM discovering my account had been emptied, I finally understood what those papers really meant. It wasn't protection, it was acquisition. When the realtor arrived to list my house, something broke inside me, or perhaps something was finally fixed. The careful, accommodating mother who had enabled this situation stepped aside, and the precise, methodical nurse who had managed life and death emergencies for 43 years, took control. I went directly to my quilting workshop, the converted sunroom filled with organized fabric, specialized tools, and careful documentation. I opened my business ledger, the most recent commission, a preservation project for the State Historical Society, was valued at 5 more projects under contract totaled $83,000. And there was the licensing offer from the International Textile Preservation Guild, $105,000 for my technique. Olivia had no idea this room existed in any meaningful way. She'd glance in occasionally, commenting on my fabric scraps, or asking when I'd finish her daughter's blanket. She saw an old woman playing with cloth. She had never bothered to understand what I was actually creating. I ran my fingers over the intricate stitching of my current project, a quilt incorporating 19th century letters from a historical society. The precise movements soothed me, just as taking a pulse or measuring medication had done throughout my nursing career. I had raised Olivia to succeed at all costs. Now I was seeing the result of that lesson. She was indeed succeeding at taking everything I had built. As I sat surrounded by the evidence of my expertise, I realized I had one advantage in this battle. Olivia thought she knew everything about me. She thought she was dealing with a forgetful old woman who needed protection from herself. She had no idea who she was really up against. The morning after the realtor incident, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, mentally cataloging my options the way I'd once prioritized patients in triage. The most critical issue was financial access. Without my savings, I was vulnerable. I opened my laptop, the same one Olivia had set up with simplified settings, because technology was challenging for me. Little did she know I managed my entire quilting business online, maintaining a private website where clients commissioned my work. I pulled up my bank statement, confirming what I already knew: a $42,307 withdrawal 3 days after my surgery, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I needed evidence and allies. Most importantly, I needed time. The doorbell rang, interrupting my planning. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery man with flowers. The card read, "Hope you're feeling better, Mom. Rest up. We've got everything handled. Love, Olivia and Daniel." Everything handled. My life being dismantled without my consent, wrapped up with a pretty bow. I placed the flowers on the counter and reached for my pulse, tendered for, elevated, but manageable. I'd made critical decisions with worse vital signs during hospital emergencies. First, I needed documentation. I spent the morning photographing everything in my house, focusing particularly on my workshop. I cataloged current commissions, client contracts, and the licensing offer letter. I created digital copies of my business records showing consistent income for the past 8 years. Most importantly, I located the business account statements separate from my personal savings, showing a balance. Olivia didn't know about this account. I'd opened it 5 years ago when my hobby started generating significant income. It wasn't much compared to what she'd taken, but it was enough to fight back. Next, I called my bank and requested an appointment with the manager, not to report fraud, but to update my account protections. By noon, I had placed a verbal password requirement on all future transactions. As I drove home, my phone rang. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, where are you? I stopped by to check on you." I could picture her standing in my living room, assessing what could be sold, what could be discarded, what might fund my care expenses. "I had errands," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Errands? Mom, you just had surgery. You shouldn't be driving. That's exactly the kind of thing we're worried about. You're not making safe choices." My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "I'm perfectly capable of determining when I can drive, Olivia." "Well, we need to discuss some things. Can you come over for dinner tonight? Daniel's making his pasta." The invitation wasn't casual. They wanted to talk about my living arrangements on their territory, where I would be at a psychological disadvantage. I recognized the tactic from my nursing days, how doctors would summon nervous parents to intimidating conference rooms, rather than speaking to them in the comfort of their child's room. "Not tonight. I'm working on a project." "A project?" Her voice took on that special patient tone. "Mom, this is important. We need to talk about Oak Ridge Manor. They're holding a spot for you, but they need the deposit soon." "I'm not moving to Oak Ridge Manor," I stated firmly, pulling into my driveway. There was a pause. "We'll discuss it tonight," she finally said. "I'll pick you up at 6. Inside my house, I headed straight to my workshop and sat at my quilting table, hands trembling with a combination of anger and fear. Not fear of Olivia, but fear of what I might become if I continued allowing this pattern. I'd spent my entire professional life advocating for patients, but somehow failed to advocate for myself. The quilt before me was half finished, a complex pattern of preserved family photographs, integrated with antique fabric. My client, a museum curator, was paying $15,000 for this piece. My fingers automatically found the precise stitches where I'd left off, the familiar movement calming my racing heart. I worked steadily for 2 hours, each stitch a silent rebellion against Olivia's narrative of my incapacity. At 5:30, I put away my tools with the same methodical care I'd once used for surgical instruments. Then I changed into the navy dress I'd worn to professional conferences when presenting my preservation techniques. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Olivia stood on my porch, car keys in hand, a brittle smile fixed on her face. "Ready to go?" she asked, already turning toward her car. "I'm not going to dinner, Olivia," I said calmly. "And we need to talk about the $42,707 you removed from my account." Her smile faltered. "Mom, let's not do this on the porch. Let's talk over dinner." "No." The word came out stronger than I'd intended, surprising us both. "We'll talk here, now." She glanced nervously at the neighbor's house, then stepped inside. "Mom," she began, in that patient tone that made my teeth clench, "I know change is scary, but Daniel and I have your best interests at heart. The money is safe, it's just being managed properly now. Return it," I said simply. "By noon tomorrow." She sighed heavily. "This is exactly why we needed to take action. These memory issues, these moments of confusion." "I'm not confused, Olivia. I'm angry. There's a difference." "Mom, I want my money returned to my account by noon tomorrow, or I'll be contacting an attorney to have the power of attorney revoked on grounds of undue influence and exploitation." Her expression shifted, the concerned daughter mask slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "Well, that would be difficult without funds to pay an attorney, wouldn't it?" The calculated cruelty hit me like a physical blow. In that moment, I finally saw my daughter clearly, not as the child I'd sacrificed for, but as the woman who viewed my aging as an inconvenience and my assets as her entitlement. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Mom, you're being emotional. This is why—" "Get out," I repeated, opening the front door. My hand didn't tremble, my voice didn't waver. For the first time in decades, I was setting a boundary with my daughter and meaning it. After she left, I sat in my workshop surrounded by evidence of my expertise, my competence, my continued value. The revelation wasn't just about Olivia's betrayal. It was about my own complicity in creating this dynamic. I had spent so many years putting her needs first that she believed it was the natural order of things. That ended today. I reached for my phone and called a number I'd found earlier while researching elder law. "Devin Michael's office," a voice answered. "My name is Josephine Harmon," I said, my voice finding its professional cadence. "I need to speak with Mr. Michaels about financial exploitation and emergency revocation of a power of attorney." "Do you have funds for a retainer, Miss Harmon?" the receptionist asked cautiously. I smiled grimly, thinking of my secret business account. Yes, and evidence. Quite a lot of both, actually. After scheduling an appointment for the following morning, I called Marcus Chen, the gallery owner who'd been pursuing me for years about licensing my preservation technique. "Joe, I was just about to call you," he answered warmly. "Have you considered our offer?" "I'm ready to discuss terms," I replied, "but I need something else first. I need your professional assessment of my work's market value. In writing." "Is everything all right, Joe?" I considered the question carefully. My daughter had emptied my bank account, was trying to sell my home, and planned to ship me to a retirement facility, all while building a case that I was mentally incompetent. But for the first time in years, I saw the situation with perfect clarity. I was done being devalued, done being dismissed, done being diminished. "No, Marcus," I answered truthfully. "Everything is not all right, but it will be." I hung up and turned back to my quilt, fingers moving with renewed purpose across the fabric. In quilting, every piece must be precisely cut, carefully positioned, and securely stitched for the pattern to emerge properly. The same principles would apply to reclaiming my life. Olivia had presented me with what seemed an impossible choice: surrender my autonomy to keep peace, or fight and potentially lose my relationship with my only child. But there was a third option she hadn't considered. I could rewrite the pattern entirely. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my mind clear despite confronting Olivia. Years of night shifts had trained my body to function precisely when needed. I showered and dressed with particular care, choosing a tailored pantsuit I'd worn to nursing conferences rather than the comfortable cardigans Olivia was accustomed to seeing me in. At 8:15, I sat across from Devin Michaels, elder law attorney. His office surprised me. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, none of the intimidating legal pretension I'd expected. "So," he said after I'd explained my situation, "your daughter obtained power of attorney while you were recovering from surgery, emptied your savings, and is attempting to sell your home, all without your informed consent." Yes, I kept my voice steady, factual. I have documentation of the bank withdrawal, proof of the real estate assessment done without my knowledge, and copies of the power of attorney I signed while still under the influence of post-surgical medication. Devin leaned forward, his expression neither pitying nor dismissive, simply focused. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Harmon, this scenario is more common than you might think. Adult children often believe they're acting in their parents' best interest, or at least convince themselves that's their motivation." "Can the power of attorney be revoked?" I asked directly. "Yes, absolutely. As the principal, you have the right to revoke it at any time, provided you're mentally competent." He paused. "Which is likely where we'll face resistance. Based on what you've described, your daughter is building a case regarding your cognitive capacity." My fingers automatically found my pulse point steady, strong. She's been documenting minor memory lapses and moments of distraction as evidence of decline. Standard approach in these cases. We'll need to counteract that narrative with evidence of your continued competence and independence. "I brought this," I said, opening my portfolio. I spread out my business records, commission contracts, client testimonials, the licensing offer letter, and my detailed accounting ledgers. I run a specialized quilting business focusing on textile preservation. These are my current clients and income records for the past 5 years. Devin's eyebrows raised as he examined the documents. "This is substantial income for what many would consider a hobby." "It stopped being a hobby when museums started calling," I replied with a small smile. "The preservation technique I developed is being considered for licensing." He whistled softly. "Mrs. Harmon, this changes the landscape considerably. This is clear evidence of complex executive functioning and business acumen." For the next hour, we developed a strategic plan. First, immediate legal protection, revoking the existing power of attorney, and filing for an emergency injunction to prevent the sale of my home. Second, financial reclamation, legal demand for the return of my funds with interest and full accounting. Third, and most important, establishing a record of my mental competence through independent assessment. "The cognitive evaluation is critical," Devin emphasized. "We need objective documentation from a geriatric specialist with no connection to your daughter or her physician friend." By noon, I had signed new documents, scheduled a comprehensive cognitive assessment, and set in motion the legal mechanisms to protect what was mine. The empowerment I felt walking out of Devin's office was tempered only by the knowledge that I was formally severing trust with my only child. My next stop was the gallery where Marcus Chen had been exhibiting textile art for 20 years. Unlike Olivia's sleek corporate law office with its intimidating glass and chrome, Marcus's gallery welcomed visitors with warm lighting and conversational seating. "Joe," Marcus greeted me warmly, clasping my hand in both of his. "I've been hoping you'd reconsider our offer." "I need your help, Marcus," I said directly. "I need a formal appraisal of my work and documentation of the licensing offer." His expression grew serious as I explained. Unlike Devin's professional distance, Marcus's reaction was immediate and personal, indignation on my behalf. "This is outrageous," he said, pacing the gallery. "Your preservation technique is revolutionizing textile conservation. Museums have been trying to replicate your methods for years. Olivia thinks I'm playing with fabric scraps, I replied, the hurt still fresh. She's never bothered to understand what I actually do. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Then we'll make it impossible for her to misunderstand. I'll have formal appraisals done on your completed works, documentation of your commissioned projects, and an updated licensing proposal by tomorrow afternoon. I nodded gratefully. There's something else. The spring textile exhibition, is there still space? His eyes lit up. For your work? Absolutely. The exhibition committee has been hoping you'd submit for years. I'd like to enter 3 pieces, and I'd like them displayed prominently. Marcus studied my face, understanding dawning. You want your daughter to see them. I want everyone to see them, I corrected. But yes, I want Olivia to witness firsthand exactly what my cute hobby really means to the artistic community. As I left the gallery, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Spoke with Oak Ridge. They need the deposit by Friday. We'll bring papers to Sunday dinner. The casual presumption that I would be signing anything further made something shift inside me. A final breaking of the maternal accommodation that had defined our relationship for decades. I didn't respond. Back home, I made 2 more calls. First to Nurse Mia Santos, my former colleague from pediatrics, who now supervised the hospital's community outreach program. "Joe," she exclaimed, "how are you recovering from surgery?" "Well enough to be arranging my own financial destruction, apparently," I replied dryly, then explained the situation. Mia's response was everything I needed: immediate belief and practical support. Those condescending little, she caught herself. "Sorry, this just infuriates me. How can I help? I need witnesses to my continued competence in professional settings," I explained. "The hospital's textile preservation workshop for the pediatric comfort quilt program, is it still running next month?" "Yes," but she paused. "Joe, are you offering to teach it? We've been trying to find someone with your expertise for ages." "I am, and I'd like it documented: photographs, participant evaluations, the works." "Consider it done," Mia said firmly. "And Joe, I'd be happy to provide a personal statement about your professional capabilities. 43 years of nursing doesn't disappear because you misplace your reading glasses occasionally." My second call was to Clara, my sister, who'd been avoiding my calls since the power of attorney incident. "Joe, is everything all right?" "No, Clara, it's not," I replied calmly. "Olivia has emptied my bank account, is trying to sell my house, and is building a case that I'm mentally incompetent, all without my informed consent." Silence stretched before Clara sighed heavily. "Olivia said you might call. She's worried about you, Joe. These memory issues." "What memory issues, specifically?" I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. "Can you name a single incident that would justify taking control of my finances?" "Well, you forgot lunch with Olivia last month, and you couldn't find your keys when we were leaving the restaurant. Clara, I worked a double shift before that lunch, and you misplaced your glasses twice during that same meal. Should I assume you're incompetent as well?" Another long pause. She said you'd be defensive. The calculated manipulation twisted in my chest. Olivia had anticipated my outreach and preemptively undermined me. The isolation tactic was textbook, cutting off potential allies by controlling the narrative. "I'm not asking you to take sides," I said finally, "but I am asking you to come see for yourself. Spend the day with me, watch me work, then decide if I need to be put away like a faulty appliance." After ending the call with Clara's reluctant agreement to visit, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by tangible evidence of my expertise. The half-finished quilt on my table was for the State Historical Society, a preservation project incorporating fragile documents from the 8th. The precision required demanded steady hands, clear vision, and complex problem-solving. All capabilities Olivia insisted I was losing. My phone buzzed again, a text from Olivia. Made appointment with Dr. Winters tomorrow at 10. She'll evaluate your situation for Oak Ridge placement. Dr. Rebecca Winters, Olivia's friend. The convenient medical authority who would undoubtedly find exactly what Olivia needed her to find. I didn't respond. Instead, I set boundaries for the first time in decades. I have made my own medical arrangements. Please do not schedule appointments without consulting me first. The response was immediate. Mom, don't be difficult. Dr. Winters is doing us a favor fitting you in. Us. As if my medical care were a collective family decision rather than my personal right. I turned off my phone and returned to my quilting. Each precise stitch was an act of resistance. Each careful cut a reassertion of my competence. The pattern emerging beneath my hands told a story of preservation and continuity values I had embodied throughout my nursing career and artistic life. By evening, I had completed the most complex section of the Historical Society quilt and developed a clear plan for the coming week. Tomorrow would bring the cognitive assessment, followed by meetings with Marcus about the exhibition and appraisals. I had an appointment with my own physician to document my physical recovery from surgery. Devon would file the emergency injunction against the house sale. Most importantly, I had taken the first step toward reclaiming myself. The lifetime habit of accommodating Olivia at my own expense was broken. The pattern was being recut, restitched, transformed into something new and stronger. As I prepared for bed, I noticed my posture in the bathroom mirror had changed. The slight stoop that had developed over years of making myself smaller in Olivia's presence was gone. My shoulders were back, my chin lifted, my gaze direct. The physical transformation reflected the internal one. I was standing at my full height for the first time in decades. The woman in the mirror wasn't a confused elderly mother needing protection. She was a skilled professional, an innovative artist, and a formidable opponent who had spent 43 years developing the precision and patience that would now serve her in the most important battle of her life. The cognitive assessment was scheduled for 9 a.m. with Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, a geriatric specialist with no connection to Olivia. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my tailored nursing conference outfit, hair neatly styled, jewelry minimal but elegant. Professional, competent, present. The receptionist handed me intake forms, which I completed with meticulous attention to detail, my handwriting precise and legible, a deliberate demonstration of capacity. Dr. Vasquez herself was younger than I expected, with intelligent eyes and a direct manner I appreciated immediately. Mrs. Harmon, she said, reviewing my forms, I understand you've requested a comprehensive cognitive assessment. Yes, I replied. My daughter has obtained power of attorney under questionable circumstances and is making claims about my cognitive decline that I dispute. Dr. Vasquez nodded, neither surprised nor judgmental. Unfortunately common. We'll conduct a thorough evaluation today, including standardized cognitive testing, functional capacity assessment, and interviews about your daily activities. For the next 2 hours, I answered questions, completed puzzles, recalled words, drew shapes, and demonstrated executive functioning across multiple domains. Throughout, I maintained focused attention, responding with the same careful precision I'd applied throughout my nursing career. One final question, Dr. Vasquez said as we concluded. Tell me about your quilting work. I explained my specialized technique for incorporating historical documents and photographs into archival quality quilts. I detailed the conservation principles, materials required, and technical challenges of balancing preservation with artistic expression. Dr. Vasquez listened intently, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she set down her pen. Mrs. Harmon, I'll prepare a formal report with complete results, but I can tell you now that your cognitive functioning is well above average for your age cohort. Your executive functioning, verbal fluency, and complex problem-solving abilities are particularly strong. I exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing. Thank you. I should note, she added, that even individuals with some cognitive changes retain the right to make their own decisions. Occasional memory lapses don't justify removing someone's autonomy, but in your case, I'm seeing no clinical evidence of concerning decline whatsoever. By noon, I had Dr. Vasquez's preliminary report in hand, clinical documentation of my mental competence that would be difficult for Olivia to dispute. I texted Devon immediately, then drove to my next confrontation. Dr. Rebecca Winter's office was located in the medical building adjacent to the hospital where I'd worked for 43 years. Her receptionist looked confused when I arrived. "Mrs. Harmon, we have you scheduled for tomorrow." "I'm aware," I replied pleasantly. "But since Dr. Winters has taken such an interest in my cognitive health, I thought I should introduce myself properly. Is she available?" "She's with a patient, but I'll wait," I said, seating myself with deliberate composure. 20 minutes later, Dr. Winters emerged to find me sitting calmly in her waiting area. She was mid-30s at most, with an expression of practiced concern that faltered when she saw me. "Mrs. Harmon, we're not scheduled until tomorrow." "Dr. Winters," I acknowledged, rising to my full height. "I understand you've been consulting with my daughter about my health without examining me or reviewing my medical records." Her eyes widened slightly. "Olivia has concerns about your decision-making capacity. As her friend, I interrupted calmly, "not as my physician. Yet you've been willing to provide medical opinions about my condition to support having me placed in assisted living." She glanced around the waiting room, where other patients were taking notice. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." In her office, Dr. Winters regained some composure, seating herself behind her desk in a clear power move. "Mrs. Harmon, your daughter is worried about you. That's all." I placed Dr. Vasquez's report on her desk. "I've just completed a comprehensive cognitive assessment with a geriatric specialist. As you can see, my cognitive functioning is above average for my age group, with no clinical indications for concern." Dr. Winters skimmed the report, her expression shifting. "One assessment doesn't necessarily." "I've also brought this," I continued, placing a second document beside the first, "a formal ethics complaint I'm prepared to file with the medical board regarding your willingness to make determinations about my capacity without proper evaluation, driven by personal relationship rather than professional standards." The color drained from her face. "That's not, I never formally." "You were scheduled to evaluate me tomorrow for Oak Ridge placement," I said evenly. "My daughter told me so explicitly. Were you planning to disclose your personal relationship with my daughter before conducting that evaluation?" Dr. Winters swallowed visibly, her collar suddenly seeming too tight. "Mrs. Harmon, there appears to be a misunderstanding." "Indeed, there is," I agreed, my voice taking on the quiet authority I'd once used to manage medical crises. "The misunderstanding is that my daughter and you believed you could make decisions about my life without my informed consent or proper evaluation." I gathered the documents, leaving only a copy of Dr. Vasquez's report. "I won't be keeping our appointment tomorrow, and I won't be filing this ethics complaint yet. That depends entirely on your future professional conduct." As I left her office, I felt a strange lightness. The nervous young nurse at reception looked at me with something approaching admiration. My next confrontation came sooner than expected. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Olivia's car already parked outside my house. She met me at the door, her expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Mom, where have you been? I've been calling all morning." "I had appointments," I replied, moving past her into my own home. "What appointments?" "You shouldn't be driving all over town alone after surgery. This is exactly why we're worried." I set my purse down deliberately. "Olivia, I had my final post-surgical check yesterday. I'm fully cleared for all normal activities, including driving." "Well, that's not the only concern," she countered. "The memory issues, the confusion. I've just come from a comprehensive cognitive assessment with Dr. Eleanor Vasquez, I interrupted, handing her the report. As you can see, my cognitive functioning is above average for my age group, with no clinical indications of decline. Olivia skimmed the document, her brow furrowing. Who is this doctor? She's not the specialist we discussed. No, she's the specialist I chose, I corrected. And I've also consulted with an attorney about revoking the power of attorney you obtained while I was under the influence of post-surgical medication. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. An attorney? Mom, you're overreacting. We're just trying to help. By emptying my bank account? By trying to sell my house without my knowledge? That's not help, Olivia. That's exploitation. That money is being managed for your care, she protested, voice rising. The house is too much for you to maintain alone. You need assistance. What I need, I said calmly, is for my daughter to respect my autonomy. And what I want is for you to return my $42,370 to my account by the end of business today. Olivia's expression hardened, the concerned daughter mask slipping to reveal calculation beneath. I don't think that would be wise, given your current state. My current state is fully documented by a geriatric specialist, I pointed out. And if the money isn't returned today, my attorney will file for emergency revocation of the power of attorney tomorrow morning, along with a formal complaint of financial exploitation. You wouldn't, she whispered, genuine shock registering on her face. I've already signed the paperwork, I confirmed. It's your choice whether we proceed with legal action. For a moment, Olivia seemed at a loss. Finally, she straightened, attorney persona sliding into place. Fine, I'll transfer the funds back. But this conversation isn't over, Mom. Your confusion about basic financial matters is exactly why we're concerned. I met her gaze steadily. Speaking of financial matters, did you know my cute hobby generates more annual income than your first year as an associate at the firm did? Her dismissive scoff was immediate. Mom, playing with fabric scraps isn't exactly. I have 6 current commissions, totaling $83,000, I interrupted calmly, and a licensing offer for $175,000 for my preservation technique. The blank incomprehension on her face would have been comical if it weren't so painful. This daughter who had never bothered to understand what I actually did, what I had built, who I really was beyond the role of supportive mother. That's ridiculous, she finally managed. Is it? Perhaps you should attend the spring textile exhibition at Chen Gallery next month. 3 of my pieces will be featured. Before she could respond, my phone rang, Marcus Chen's name lighting up the screen. I answered, maintaining eye contact with Olivia. Joe, excellent news. Marcus's voice came through clearly. The International Textile Conservation Guild has increased their licensing offer to $200,000 after reviewing your latest work. They're eager to move forward. That's wonderful, Marcus, I replied, watching Olivia's expression shift from disbelief to shock. Could you send the updated offer letter to my email? I'd like my attorney to review. After ending the call, I faced my daughter again. The money, Olivia. Today. She left without another word, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. The final confrontation took place 3 days later at Devon's office. Olivia had returned my money, as demanded, but continued pushing for the Oak Ridge placement, insisting we meet with neutral parties to discuss my care. Devon had suggested using his office, and I'd agreed, knowing exactly what would unfold. I arrived early, dressed in a deep blue dress that matched my exhibition piece currently being prepared at Chen Gallery. Devon met me in reception, his expression professional but with a gleam of anticipation. Olivia and Daniel arrived precisely on time, both in corporate attire, carrying portfolios filled with what I assumed were brochures for Oak Ridge Manor and whatever evidence they'd compiled of my supposed decline. Thank you all for coming, Devon began, Mrs. Harmon has asked me to facilitate this discussion regarding her living arrangements and financial management. We appreciate the opportunity for dialogue, Daniel replied smoothly. We've been very concerned about Josephine's welfare since her surgery. Is that why you attempted to sell her house without her knowledge? Devon asked pleasantly. Daniel's smile faltered. We were simply exploring options that would better suit her needs. And the $42,370 withdrawn from her account, was that also exploring options? Those funds were transferred to a managed account for her care expenses, Olivia interjected. Given her confusion about financial matters, we felt it prudent. Confusion, I interrupted quietly. You keep using that word. What specific evidence of confusion have you observed that would justify taking control of my finances? Olivia opened her portfolio. You've forgotten appointments, misplaced items, become disoriented in familiar places. Examples, please, Devon prompted. Specific incidents. Last month she forgot our lunch date, Olivia began. When I arrived at her house, she was distracted, surrounded by fabric scraps, completely unaware of the time. I was completing a commission for the State Historical Society, I corrected. A preservation project worth $12,800. I became absorbed in my work and lost track of time, something that happens to professionals in all fields, including law. Or have you never worked through lunch on a case, Olivia? Her mouth opened, then closed without response. At that moment, the conference room door opened. Marcus Chen entered, followed by a woman I recognized as the curator from the State Historical Society. Sorry we're late, Marcus said, though his timing was precisely as planned. Who are these people? Daniel demanded. Marcus Chen, gallery owner. Marcus introduced himself, and this is Dr. Eliza Montgomery from the State Historical Society. We're here to provide expert testimony regarding Mrs. Harmon's professional contributions to textile preservation and conservation. Olivia's face flushed, starting at her collar and rising rapidly. This is a private family meeting. Actually, Devon interrupted smoothly. This is a meeting to establish Mrs. Harmon's capacity and independence, for which expert witnesses are entirely appropriate. Mr. Chen, perhaps you could explain the significance of Mrs. Harmon's work. For the next 15 minutes, Marcus and Dr. Montgomery detailed my contributions to textile preservation, the museums that displayed my work, and the licensing offer that had now reached. Throughout their presentation, Olivia and Daniel sat in increasingly uncomfortable silence, their narrative of my incapacity collapsing with each expert validation of my professional standing. When they finished, I finally spoke, my voice finding the quiet authority that had served me through decades of nursing crises. Olivia, Daniel, I understand you believe you were acting in my best interest, but you saw my silence as confusion, my precision as obsession, and my art as craft. The mistake was entirely yours. I opened my portfolio and slid documents across the table. These are the papers revoking the power of attorney, effective immediately. I've also established a trust with Devon as executor, unrelated to either of you. My home will remain in my name alone, and my finances will remain under my exclusive control. Olivia stared at the documents, her attorney's mind clearly processing the completeness of her defeat. Daniel tugged at his collar, sweat beading visibly at his hairline. Mom, Olivia began, switching tactics, we were just worried about you. After Dad died, I promised I'd always take care of you. That's all I was trying to do. The emotional appeal might have worked weeks ago. The old Joe, the one who had spent decades accommodating Olivia at her own expense, might have wavered, might have compromised to keep peace. But that Joe was gone. I don't need you to take care of me, I said with simple dignity. I need you to respect me. There's a difference. In the silence that followed, I saw something shift in Olivia's expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but perhaps the first glimmer of recognition that the power dynamic between us had fundamentally changed. Olivia, the spring textile exhibition opens next Friday at Chen Gallery. 3 of my pieces will be featured. I'd like you to attend, not as my caretaker, but as my daughter. That invitation is your choice to accept or decline. She paused at the door, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite read. I'll consider it. After they left, I sat quietly in Devon's conference room, surrounded by the documentation of my expertise, my competence, my continued value. The justice I'd secured wasn't about punishing Olivia. It was about reclaiming myself. 6 months after the confrontation in Devon's office, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The most visible change was my home, no longer just a place to live, but a proper studio and teaching space. The sunroom workshop had expanded to include the spare bedroom, now converted into a documentation and photography area for my preservation projects. I stood in this expanded space on a bright morning, carefully mounting my latest piece, a quilt incorporating fragile letters from World War II, commissioned by a national museum. My hands moved with practiced confidence, the arthritis in my knuckles managed through specialized tools and exercises, never becoming the limitation Olivia had used as evidence of my decline. The doorbell rang, interrupting my work. I opened the door to find a young woman clutching a small box. Mrs. Harmon? I'm Zoe Washington. I work at County General in Pediatrics. She hesitated. Nurse Santos suggested I come see you. I recognized the name immediately. Mia had mentioned this promising young nurse, interested in memory preservation projects for long-term pediatric patients. Come in, Zoe, I invited, leading her to my studio. Mia mentioned you might visit. Zoe's eyes widened as she took in the organized workspace, the specialized equipment, the half-finished museum piece mounted on my working frame. This is not what I expected. I smiled, recognizing the assumption she had brought with her, the same one Olivia had held so firmly. You expected a grandmother's hobby corner? Some yarn and needles, perhaps? She blushed. Something like that. Nurse Santos said you were doing innovative work, but this is professional. It is, I agreed, without defensiveness or need to justify. 6 months ago, I might have rushed to prove my legitimacy. Now, I simply allowed my work to speak for itself. Zoe carefully opened the box she'd brought. Inside was a child's hospital gown, decorated with colorful signatures and drawings. This belonged to Tommy Wilson. He was with us for nearly a year during cancer treatment. He didn't make it, but his parents want something to preserve these messages from the hospital staff. I examined the gown carefully, assessing the fabric, the ink types, the preservation challenges. I can create a conservation-grade memory quilt, incorporating this and any photographs they might want to include. The textile will be treated to prevent degradation, and the finished piece will be museum quality, designed to last generations. How much would something like that cost? Zoe asked hesitantly. For a pediatric memorial project? $3,000, which covers materials and basic labor. I typically charge $12,000 for similar private commissions, but I have a different rate structure for families who've lost children. The business aspect came naturally now. No apologies, no diminishment of my work's value. Another transformation that had emerged from necessity during the conflict with Olivia. As I explained the preservation process to Zoe, my phone chimed with a calendar alert. Lucia, Beginner's Workshop, 10. Lucia Fernandez had become my most dedicated student over the past months. At 29, she was drawn to the preservation aspect after losing her grandmother and inheriting family textiles she didn't know how to properly maintain. Did you always know you wanted to do this? Zoe asked as I demonstrated techniques to both women. I considered the question, automatically straightening my posture as I did now, whenever reflecting on my past. No, for most of my life I was a pediatric nurse. This career emerged later, partly from necessity and partly from discovering I had something valuable to contribute in a different form. Necessity? Lucia asked. I hesitated only briefly. 6 months ago, I might have deflected, keeping my private struggles private. Now, I recognized the value in sharing my journey. After my husband died, I raised my daughter alone while working full-time in nursing. When she was a teenager and increasingly independent, I found myself with occasional evening hours alone. Quilting began as something to fill that time, a way to stay productive even when not at the hospital. My hands continued demonstrating the technique as I spoke. Over the years, it evolved from hobby to serious study to innovation. I developed preservation methods that traditional conservationists hadn't considered because I approached textiles from both a scientific and artistic perspective. And now museums commission your work, Zoe observed. Yes, the transition from being valued primarily as a caregiver to being recognized for my expertise wasn't always smooth. Some people, including my daughter, struggled to see me in this new light. Both women nodded with immediate understanding. Young as they were, they already recognized the challenge of being seen as more than one's most visible role. Our workshop continued for 2 hours, the three of us forming an impromptu community of women sharing knowledge across generations. When they finally left, Zoe with a commission agreement for Tommy's memorial quilt, Lucia with homework for our next session, I felt the deep satisfaction of meaningful work shared. I was tidying my studio when my phone rang. Olivia's name appeared on the screen. Our relationship had undergone its own transformation since the confrontation. After missing the exhibition opening, a pointed absence that spoke volumes, Olivia had eventually visited the gallery alone. Marcus later told me she had spent nearly an hour studying my featured pieces, reading the plaque that detailed my preservation innovations, overhearing the reverent comments from museum curators. The first tentative reconciliation came as a text message. "Your quilts are beautiful. I didn't know." Not an apology, but an acknowledgement. From Olivia, it was significant. Since then, we had established a new, more distant relationship, monthly lunches, rather than weekly dinners, conversations focused on neutral topics, rather than presumptions about my needs or capabilities. She had not mentioned Oak Ridge Manor again. "Hello, Olivia," I answered. "Hi, Mom." Her voice carried the slightly formal tone she now used with me, professional respect rather than familiar presumption. "I'm calling about Hannah's birthday. She's been asking for one of your quilts." Hannah was Olivia's stepdaughter, now 12, a quiet child who had shown interest in my work when few others in the family had bothered. "What kind of quilt is she interested in?" I asked, already moving to my design table. "Actually, she wants to learn how to make one. She asked if you might teach her, the way you're teaching that woman from your exhibition." I paused, surprised. Olivia had never before suggested I had anything to teach the younger generation. "I'd be happy to work with her. When would you like to bring her over?" "That's the thing," Olivia replied, hesitation evident. "She wants to come for a week this summer, to stay with you and learn properly. Daniel and I are planning a trip to Europe, and Hannah suggested she could spend that time with you instead of going to her usual summer camp." The request represented a seismic shift in our new reality. Olivia, who months ago had deemed me incapable of living independently, was now considering leaving her stepdaughter in my care for a week. "I'd enjoy that very much," I said simply. "Good. That's good." Olivia cleared her throat. "There's something else. The family history project you did for the Montgomerys, the one with the Civil War letters. Hannah's class is studying genealogy, and she wondered if you might help with a similar project for our family." "I'd be happy to," I repeated, hearing the significance beneath the simple request. Olivia was finally recognizing the value of what I did, not just as art or craft, but as family legacy. After we ended the call, I sat in my studio, surrounded by the evidence of my transformed life. The professional equipment, the organized workspace, the contracts and commission agreements, neatly filed in my business records, the physical manifestation of my reclaimed identity. But the transformation went beyond the visible changes to my home and business. It lived in my straightened posture, my unwavering voice, my willingness to set and maintain boundaries. It showed in the strategic science I now deployed, not from fear, but from strength, choosing when to speak and when silence itself made the most powerful statement. The doorbell rang again, my third visitor of the day. This time it was Marcus, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "They accepted," he announced, as soon as I opened the door. "The Smithsonian Conservation Department wants to license your preservation technique for their textile collection. Full attribution, your name on the conservation method," and he paused dramatically, $230,000 for the exclusive institutional rights. I accepted the congratulations with genuine pleasure, but without the desperate gratitude that might once have characterized my response. This validation was earned through decades of precise, innovative work, not a gift to be received with excessive humility. After Marcus left, I returned to my studio and stood before my current project, the most complex and personal piece I had ever attempted. Unlike my commissioned works, this quilt incorporated elements of my own history, snippets of my nursing uniforms, fragments of Robert's teaching materials, even a tiny square from the blanket Olivia had come home from the hospital in. My hands moved with practiced confidence across the fabric, each stitch both a technical achievement and an emotional statement. In nursing, I had learned that healing isn't always about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about finding new ways to function around permanent changes. The same principle applied to my relationship with Olivia. What had broken between us might never be fully restored, but we were finding new ways to exist in each other's lives with mutual respect, if not complete understanding. The evening light filtered through my studio windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I had once feared these solitary hours, filling them with busy work to avoid confronting my shifting identity as Olivia needed me less. Now I savored the quiet, productive solitude, not as absence of company, but as presence of self. My phone chimed with messages from Zoe. "Tommy's parents love the design concept. They're asking if you might teach a workshop for our pediatric staff on memory projects for families. Would you consider it?" From Devon, "Smithsonian contract looks solid. Congratulations, Joe, well-deserved recognition." And from Olivia, "Hannah is thrilled about the summer quilting week. Thank you." I set my phone aside and returned to my work, fingers moving with the precise, measured confidence that had served me through decades of nursing and now defined my second career. The woman I had become through crisis and necessity was not simply an older version of who I had been. She was in many ways an entirely new creation, pieced together from preserved elements of my past and innovative patterns for my future. Like the quilts I created, my life had become a preservation project, honoring what came before while ensuring it remained vibrant, visible, and valued in the present. Some relationships, like some fabrics, required special techniques to maintain. Others needed to be carefully cut away, the patterns restructured for something more balanced and sustainable. As evening deepened into night, I completed the final stitches on the museum commission and prepared it for delivery. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new students, new challenges to my expertise. But unlike the uncertainties after my surgery a year ago, these challenges were welcome, opportunities to demonstrate mastery rather than threats to my autonomy. I moved through my home, turning off lights, noting with satisfaction how each room now reflected my true self rather than others' expectations. The transformed space symbolized the most important lesson of this difficult year: that standing at my full height, literally and figuratively, was not selfish, but necessary. That precision was not obsession, but expertise. That silence could be strength rather than submission. In my bedroom, I paused before the mirror, seeing not the diminished woman Olivia had tried to confine to assisted living, but the master textile artist whose work hung in museums, the teacher whose techniques would be taught to future conservationists, the mother who had finally learned to value herself as highly as she valued her child. You saw my silence as confusion, my precision as obsession, and my art as craft. I whispered to my reflection, recalling the words that had marked my reclamation. The mistake was entirely yours, but it had been my mistake too, allowing others to define me, diminish me, decide for me. That pattern was now permanently altered, the pieces rearranged into something stronger and more authentic. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and opportunities. But for tonight, in the quiet of my reclaimed home, I was precisely where I belonged, standing at my full height, hands steady, future unfolding according to my own design.